Coogs House. More on this surprise of the summer and whether or not it was really a surprise.
You are Locked On Cougs, your daily podcast on the Houston Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Cougs, daily podcast about your Houston Cougars. I'm your host, Houston-born teacher and coach Parker Ainsworth, joining you from vacation once again. And whether you're a Houston fan or just a hater who can step by, thank you for making Locked On Cougs your first listen of the day. And we're joining the conversation, but don't know what to say. Tell us if you prefer hot or cold sandwiches. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. More on that later. But even though we're on vacation here at Locked On Cougs, we got to talk about a bunch of stuff going on with the Houston Cougar Athletic Department. You can't always pick when this news comes out. And so while it's a little bit more of a sparsely filled week with news in Houston Cougardom, we couldn't really pass up on this kind of stuff. I want to talk about some potential replacements for the athletic director position, kind of where Houston could be looking. I think there's one leading candidate we have to mention as well. But first and foremost, we've got to talk about this big surprise. Now, it's come out a lot since Chris Pezman was fired as athletic director last Thursday to be specific, that this was a surprise. I think it's interesting to look at it that way because, frankly, it feels like surprising to all of us. I think that even his harshest critics might not have thought he was going to get fired this summer. And I think his statement over the weekend says a lot. So I want to quickly read what he posted on X. He just took a picture of a note and shared it through his official X account. He also has changed over all his pictures on his social media accounts. Are no longer him as AD of University of Houston, but just kind of him as a family man. His note says, "It has been a true honor and privilege to serve my alma mater during a transformative period in college athletics. Together, we achieved unprecedented growth and success that has laid the foundation for a bright future for Houston athletics. The incredible commitment to the comprehensive excellence exhibited by our student athletes, coaches, and staff is made possible by the support of university donors, season ticket holders, and fans. To continue our momentum, we must rally together and remain true to our values and our commitments. I will forever be grateful to President Khator, Tillman Fertitta, and the Board of Regents for the opportunity to serve as Director of Athletics, and I move forward confident that we are in a better place. Go Cougs, Pez." Now, I feel like, it took him a couple days to write that, and it doesn't seem super deep. It wasn't like something that would take, a couple days for the thought. I think that the window there tells us a lot about the surprise. I also think it's interesting to point out that, he absolutely let the school in a better place. Like, I don't want to discourage or discredit. Like, the school is in a better place after Pezman than it was before it in terms of athletics. But he also says things about continuing momentum and incredible commitment to comprehensive excellence exhibited by student athletes, coaches, and staff. Those kinds of parts of it make me feel like he wasn't done doing the things he was trying to do. And that makes me feel like this was another layer of the surprise. Now, I will say that it's interesting that he makes Houston a better place and then gets fired for being unprepared or unable to be the person that helps Houston in the place that they are in. And that adds, a layer to this because, had he not been successful in getting Houston elevated into a Power 4 program and ready for the next level of college athletics, he might not have ever gotten fired because it wouldn't be that to get rid of. And frankly, as an alum, as guy people generally liked, I think that that's all working in his favor. But the ultimate thing is this changing paradigm that Khator mentioned in her statement last week. And that paradigm includes things like NIL. NIL's behind us. We're getting forward in that. kind of built. That's just the way it is. It's not ever going to change. We're not going backwards on that ever. That's not going away. We have to get ready to do that better. You also have paying athletes very clearly from the school happening in the next couple of years. Is going to be finding ways to get that $20 to $22 million out there, and all of those kinds of financial things, the raising of the money, feels like, from a bird's eye view, it was Pezman's weakest thing on his resume. And frankly, it's been a notable issue since like the Big 12 announcement was made a couple years back at this point, right? A few years back at this point, right? Where once that announcement got made, it was very clear that Houston was going to have to start spending big league dollars and start finding those big league dollars to spend. And there's been a lot of schools that did that better in our own conference. Central Florida and Orlando has done that much better. You look at like the NIL programs and packages they have, the athletes that has coming into their football program. BYU and Salt Lake City, right? Well, it's got a more international presence because of the church that they affiliate themselves with, right? It has done very, very well in these regards and is landing legitimate, like, professional basketball players that could have been drafted in the 2024 draft, coming instead to spend a year at BYU and earn that NIL money while playing basketball there and then get drafted the next year, right? So, like, I think that we could also look, I guess, I can see people are talking about SMU up the road in Dallas got $159 million in their first 6 months since the news about the ACC, right? Like, schools in big cities, in pro sport markets, can do this better. And Houston has not. And it hasn't felt like there's been a whole lot of follow through on serious planning to do better in those aspects. And I think that that's why some would argue this is not a surprise. Of course, this is going to happen. This has not gone well. On the other hand, what you have that could have gone well, or could make this feel like a surprise, is that this wasn't done back around like when Dana Holgorsen got fired, right? One of the big blemishes on his resume outside of the funding has been that Pezman kept coaches around longer than he should have in some cases. And we'll see who the next athletic director is and if they want to do the same. But if you'd have fired Pezman back around Christmas, turn of the new year, when you also got rid of Dana, it would have felt like lumped together, right? Okay, you gave this extension to this guy. That wasn't going to work out. That was kind of your marquee hire. You're both just gone, right? Instead, he got like a 6-month window that I would argue went pretty well. I mean, I'd want more wins in softball and baseball, and we're still finding out more about the softball off the field stuff. But on the whole, it kind of feels like that's a weird 6 months to have done it, especially because he nailed the hire to replace Dana. Willie Fritz is a great hire. So I don't know. It's just a weird combination of things. I think the final thing that makes me think this was a surprise, though, to a lot of people, is even though I know Go Coogs said that they were hearing rumblings this a couple weeks ago, but didn't think anything of it, and Duarte said he'd kind of heard the same. I think a lot of people had an idea that he was on thin ice, but he was on Coogs on the road, right? Going around the state of Texas, selling the program, marketing the program, talking about the future of the program, athletic department program, I guess the whole athletic department, with both Willie Fritz and Kelvin Sampson. And it has to be fairly clear that Sampson and Fritz are going to be a part of building up whatever comes next, right? They're going to be they might not have the final vote, but they're going to have a say and get to meet and shake hands with the candidates that come through. And they'll have, frankly, a voice in what they're looking for. They're coaches that the department, you'd assume, trusts. And they're sitting right next to him in this Cougs on the road thing. And all indications are that was going fairly pleasant and well. There was no body language, demeanor thing for me that would make Pezman look like he knew he was a dead man walking in this instance, right? And so I do feel like this was a surprise on the timing, especially being 2 football seasons, a little over 18 months out from the end of his contract, and all of those layers to it. the timing gets really interesting on whether or not like you could have been expected possibly to be fired this time of year. And it's a surprise on all those levels. But, and what I've been trying to circle around to, it's a surprise in the timing. I'm not sure it's a surprise in the impact, in that like Pezman needed to do things better. He's a nice person. I got to talk to him briefly at Big 12 Media Days last year. He's a nice person. He appreciates way people cover the programs and appreciates the energy and spirit that we shows like this bring to the programs. And again, he was nothing but nice to me, and so I will never say anything outside of that. But as far as like the actual job, money's being spent on facilities right now, right? And that's a big deal, and it's probably still not enough money to build up all the facilities. We're building a big football and athletic center, but on the whole, there's more facilities work to be done, and that's being done because we were years, if not decades, behind in that realm. But while we're spending money on those things and doing those things, we also need to build up our NIL program, because that's kind of the future of this thing. Facilities feels like the past, and we're so far behind it that our past has to be our present. We're not ready for our future, and that's a lot of layers, and that's a lot of problems. And ultimately, fairly or unfairly, those problems fall at Pezman's doorstep. And so now it's going to be someone else's doorstep. And I want to talk for a second about who that could be. But first, I do want to talk a little bit about America's #1 sportsbook. Now, you can keep on winning all summer long. This summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. So head over to FanDuel.com/lockedon and start making the most out of your summer. Now, the Astros have had a better month, a better end of the month anyway. Things are looking good, coming off of a sweep. Their FanDuel odds are still kind of in your favor. If you go check them out. I wanted to talk to them about the Game 7 Stanley Cup Finals in this bit, actually. But honestly, those lines are moving so erratically, so chaotically. Catch it while you can. If it's FanDuel.com/lockedon to do it, make sure you make the most out of your summer over there today. FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the MLB. All right, leader in the clubhouse to replace Pezman, leader of the list of names to take over, is a guy named Jeremiah Dickey. And if the name sounds familiar, that's because he should be. He was an assistant AD, worked his way up to be the assistant AD under Mack Rhodes. He had a number of different jobs at Houston for about 7 years. But the more folks you talk to, and I've admittedly only talked to a couple vacation, but also like just on the phone, people that I trust and say, hey, what do you think? What do you hear about this? Jeremiah Dickey's name is the one that comes up the most, both because he's a strong candidate, to say the least. We'll talk about that in a second. But also, I think because he's a guy that would be easy to go get for Houston on purely dollars and cents type of ideas, right? Jeremiah Dickey is making $410,000 plus bonuses for successful things per year at Boise. He's an AD at Boise State, right? Pezman's contract before was in the $600,000 range, right? Again, bonuses can shape things based on how well teams and programs do. But just giving him Pezman's old contract would be a pretty secure way to say, hey, we can pay you a lot more money. Never mind that, and the reality is he'll probably be making more than Pezman made, because that's how these contracts go. The next guy gets more than the last guy, unless, right? I think that makes him a pretty easy person in terms of dollars and cents to go get. Never mind that he is a Texan. Never mind that he has been here before. Never mind he's familiar with the Big 12. He spent some time at Baylor. I think there's lots of layers to this that make it feel like he's a kind of natural candidate to go get this. He was a Mack Rhodes guy, and for what it's worth, Sampson, who I've said before, should have a heavy say in how this goes, Sampson has nothing but good things to say about Mack Rhoades. Mack Rhoades is the one that hired him, right? But we remember around the Houston and Baylor game back in, was it February, where he had nothing positive things to say about him before and after the game, leading into that game, right? He said, was getting smirks from in the hallway and giving each other a hard time and all those kinds of things. Like, Sampson loves Mack Rhoades. So if Mack Rhoades likes Jeremiah Dickey, I think it's fair to say that, like, while it's not always the transitive property, that's a vote of confidence for Dickey himself. In his time at Houston, Jeremiah Dickey was a part of a fairly successful athletic department as well, at least in terms of growth. They set records in money raised 7 consecutive years. That's pretty strong for Cougar pride. He also was involved with hiring 14 different head coaches with Mack Rhoades. And I mentioned the records being broken year after year. They raised $100 million and constructed $160 million for the new facilities. So while the game is different now in Houston than it was because they had to put some of that towards NIL money, he clearly knows how to raise money, was involved in campaigns that help raise money. And so he spent some time at Missouri and then Baylor, and now has been the AD at Boise State since 2021. And I think people look at this as like, oh, great, Houston's going to go get a group of 5 person. That upsets people. Like, you're in the Power 4, you feel like you should be able to take another Power 4 type of person or get a Power 4 type of commissioner, type of AD. But I do feel like Boise State's a little bit different. In terms of revenue sharing or revenue making, Boise State's kind of been the high end of the group of 5 for a long time now. It's also the marquee public institution in Idaho, and they say about that what you will. They're a pretty big program in Idaho, right? And so it's not the recruiting base that is Houston, Texas for coaches, but in terms of like hitting your state for money, it's kind of a big deal, right? And he has, while he's been there, been involved in successful searches for coaches, and he's kind of watched the elevation of a basketball program. A lot of success at Boise State basketball since 2020, and he touts that, right? But he also has, in his time there, had experience doing exactly what we're talking about, the twofold raising money for 2 different things. He's helped raise money for new facilities while also spinning a high-end NIL program that's kind of one of the most respected NIL programs in the group of 5. It both is at the top of the charts in terms of dollars it's bringing in and in terms of effectiveness in getting that, distributed amongst athletes with like reason. Like, it's not just like a pay for play kind of system as much as it is a, like, you do this, we do that, you post these, we'll post that, we'll give you those kind of like things. It's connecting athletes with companies they can represent. He's involved in building that program within the school. They, within that program, have also done things. They've done things like different educational programs for the students to understand what they're getting into and what kind of deals are good for them and how different things will benefit them in the long run, what to do with that money once they're seeing these large amounts of money. He's running all of that while also renovating the football facilities, renovating locker rooms, building up a stadium. Like, he's doing all of that as well. And that balance, while you would hope that the dollar amount is a lot higher at Houston than it was at Boise, that balance is that balance. And that balance is something that he's been working towards since he got there. I also, though, I think, and this is, we'll wrap up on Jeremiah Dickey as a favorite for the job. I like that. I like that he's been to Houston before. I like that he's done this job. He's not just like an assistant AD coming into being an AD. He's been an AD before. I like all of that. I like how, when doing research for this, and yes, I was doing research for this on vacation because I'm interested to see who Houston hires next. I'm fairly as someone who really cares about how Houston does in sports, I care a lot about who this person is. And so I was trying to figure out who this person could be. Um, I went back and found interviews from him as far back as like the spring of 23 and winter meetings of 2022, 23, and as far back as the beginning of the NIL era when players were getting paid for name, image, and likeness. He was the forefront in the group of five by saying, like, this is the beginning. It's not going away. And eventually, we're going to have to pay players as schools. That's just going to be, and I don't know when that happens, but it's going to be the way this goes. That's as far back as over a year ago. Right. And now that's where we are. We're talking about having to raise and find ways to make $20 million extra dollars per year in athletic revenue to pay the kids for play. He's seen this coming. And if nothing else, the foresight there is encouraging, much like the Brett Yormark foresight we've talked about is encouraging. The foresight there is very encouraging. And I'm ready for that kind of thing in the third ward. Honestly. Now, I got another idea for who this could be because there's someone who, believe it or not, could also be looking for this job. And I want to talk about that in a second. But first, as Houston is trying to put together the best athletic department they can, you're trying to put together the best ride you can, and passion, drive, and patience are the formula for winning championships. And also, it keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. Over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die. You'll always find exactly what you are looking for in eBay Guaranteed Fit. Your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back with eBay Motors. You're burning rubber and not cash. With the parts you want, the prices you need, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Electronics only. Exclusive supply. eBay Guaranteed Fit is only available to U.S. customers. All right, now hear me out. When you new AD, Houston is new to the Power Four. Power Four is only the Power Four, not the Power Five, because the Pac-12 is kind of no more. It's technically still around, but really it's no more. And so, Washington State and Oregon State are out there as programs that are used to things like the Group of Five, but don't actually function in any power conference anymore. They just have themselves and whatever else happens in the PNW. And so my thought is, why not look there? Right? Athletic departments up there, you would have to assume, have people that want to be in the Power Five, or now the Power Four, and B, schools that are frantically figuring out if they can continue to pay to be in these kinds of, for lack of a better phrase, games when the conference around them disintegrated. Now, my first thought was Washington State for a number of reasons, but they actually just lost their AD in March, Pat Chun. He'd been their AD since 2018, and amidst all of this, left Washington State to go for the AD of Washington. Now, I'm sure that's really tough for them to swallow, but their interim didn't strike me as necessarily someone to come in and lead a program like Houston in the precarious situation Houston's in, where they got to find a way to quickly adapt to the Power Four. And so I don't think that Washington State's the place to look. The place to look is Oregon State with athletic director named Scott Barnes. Now, much like Washington State just lost their athletic director to Washington, it was very clear that he was looking to stay relatively close to home, but also to move to a power conference. Washington's going to the Big Ten, right? Scott Barnes, it stands to reason, could be looking to do the same kind of thing, and I don't think Oregon is exactly hiring. Now, I will say the knock on Scott Barnes as far as this job goes, that he's a West Coast guy. Except for the 2 years he spent at the AD at Pitt, he's pretty much been in the Pacific Northwest his entire professional career, and he played college basketball at Fresno State, West Coast through and through. He was AD at Humboldt, North California, Eastern Washington. He was second in command at UW. He was at Utah State. Like I said, 2 years at Pitt, and he's been at Oregon State since 2017. Okay. Add all that together, he's been no lower than second in command in an athletic department since 1997. He is from Spokane, Washington. It could be hard to pry him from the Pacific Northwest, but he's a great candidate for what Houston's trying to do. Since he's been at Oregon State, he's arranged a $161 million football renovation and then a $42 million football project later for new facilities, not renovations, but new facilities. He's raised $23 million for track and gymnastics facilities, $4 million for a sports performance center. While he's been at Oregon State, he's been responsible for hiring 8 different present and current head coaches, including football, baseball, and volleyball. And in a way that helps serve what Houston does best right now, he's been the chair of the Division I basketball committee, a men's basketball committee, for a number of years. All of that is to say that this guy's got a great athletic director resume. Done this at Oregon State. Oregon State's NIL program actually ranked pretty high in the Pac-12 the last 2 years. He understands how to do those kinds of things. He also, for its worth, is competing in Oregon in a way that I would argue is not unlike Houston. In Oregon, much like across the nation with people that like fancy uniforms, the story is really what's happening in Eugene. People care a lot more about the Ducks, and there's a lot of t-shirt fans of the Ducks. You're constantly competing with this gigantic brand. And he still has managed to make a very successful, financially speaking, athletic program there at Oregon State, even if the Pac-12 crumbled around him. In Houston, you're competing with 3 different SEC schools at least, coming in and poaching a lot of your talent and poaching a lot of your dollars and poaching a lot of your city. Why couldn't he do the same kind of thing here? Where instead of just, saying we'll take our fair share, our corner of the market, he competes in the market and levels up where Houston is in the Houston area and how Houston is respected amongst other places. I understand there's some wariness amongst taking a Pac-12 person because the Pac-12 became the Pac-2, and you could argue that's because of a number of different things going on, athletics and money this and money that or whatever. But truthfully, that falls more on Klyavkov, the commissioner of the Pac-12, and frankly, the brand of Oregon State wasn't necessarily altered by any of that, as much as it was just like, okay, now Oregon State is going to find a new home, and it hasn't found one yet, right? I think Scott Barnes would be a good candidate, and I think the biggest thing is he realistically going to leave the Pacific Northwest after having spent almost 30 years in athletic administration? I think you got to give him a call. And I think you got to at least give him a call and say, hey, we know you're good at this. We know you're going to be in the Power 4. Let's give you a chance to do it, right? Because if you don't, I worry that you're going to run into someone that does, and you're going to regret it because they're going to have the money and the say and the whatever to bring him home. Now, I'm not saying I'll be upset with Jeremiah Dickey. I'm saying I'll be upset with Scott Barnes. I am saying I need Houston to make this hire soon. They need to get this running. They need to get the system running. They need to get marketing up to snuff. They need to get the financials back to rolling, money coming back in. Whenever it happens, clearly even on vacation, we'll be here at Locked on Cougs. Now, I got some stuff I want to do around the NBA draft. Like I'll probably drop some. I want to talk some about Jamal beforehand, and wherever Jamal ends up after the fact, I want to talk about the potential landing spot there. When July comes, after the 4th of July, I'll kind of get back to the everyday thing. But between now and then, keep subscribed, hit the bell so you know when stuff happens and you know when we are live. Make sure you get up to date each and every day. And then, of course, if any news breaks as far as who is hired or who else is fired or anything like that, we're going to bring it to you. Even from vacation, I promise. Locked On Cougars is a proud member of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team, our Houston Cougars, each and every day. Go Cougs.